welcome everyone. Great to have so many people here for 2 fantastic talks, and also Dwayne as well, who isn't also fantastic. not to belittle him in any way. So just really to kind of, obviously this is our May user group, so we just, every time we go through our code of conduct, which is that me and Chris came up with the idea behind the user group. Our main aim is to make it a fun, safe place for everyone to learn and grow within the area of the Microsoft Cloud Security Stack, which is constantly growing. We're inclusive and diverse and community, and we expect everyone to respect each other, whether they're attending or presenting in our group. We're all here to learn from each other mainly. That's the key real aim. Right. Over to Chris for the socials.
Yeah, so we've got our channels here, and so you got YouTube, our LinkedIn page, as well as Twitter, so you can see all the information that we're posting out about the meetups that we are hosting. And you're also via YouTube, you're available to go on there and watch the recordings back on that platform.
Cool. So yeah, just by introduction, I'm Charlie Goff. I've been kind of in the community area now for just over a year and a bit. Been writing blogs for a little bit longer. Haven't written any in a long time because everything seems to get rather too busy. I work for a company called Open Systems, which is an MDR provider based out of Switzerland, but with offices in the US and work globally. Yeah, and just kind of here to, the way I've learned is by learning from others. So it's the best way to get information across. And so yeah, you can either follow me on LinkedIn, search for me for Charlie Goff, or check me out on Twitter at GetOffMeLand.
Can you not say that properly, Charlie?
Sorry?
Can you not say your Twitter tag properly?
Get off me land.
Okay, guys, I'm Chris Wright. Thanks for joining us tonight. You can see I'm on LinkedIn and Twitter there. So follow me up. Always happy to speak to people who've got the same interest in themselves, particularly around the Microsoft security stack. Currently work for HTG in the UK as an Azure SME, and I've been involved in the community myself for around 12 months, or just over 12 months. And this is obviously, like Charlie, it's our way of giving back and trying to share knowledge. But, you know, we wouldn't be where we are now without these user groups, and we you know, with the security elements really important, and we want to have a group focused on that. But it is a community for all, so we want everyone to get involved, and no one be shy. It's we're a community here, and we're all here to learn off each other.
So, agenda today, obviously we've done the first part, which is welcome and introductions, and then we're going to hand over to Aidan for his talk on DevOps with Azure Firewall. And then hopefully at 9 o'clock BST, we should have Karinne here to talk about essential M365. I can't talk today. Essential M365 security features you should be using today. And then we've got Dwayne, who's joining us. Well, he's already on, but he's going to spend about 10 minutes just talking about the pack SecPro community as well. And I believe there's a bit of a giveaway as well, isn't there, Chris?
Yeah, that's right. And then we'll follow it up with our monthly quiz, which with prizes kindly donated by our sponsors, HTG.
The only other thing I want to mention before we get started, obviously, if there's anything that is, if we can refrain from any conversations about anything under NDA, because the session is being recorded and will be published on YouTube, and we don't really want anybody to get in trouble. Yeah, so that'd be great. Cheers. And going to hand over to Aidan now.
Cool, thanks guys. Hi everyone. Right, I will do a screen share. And go. Cool. So tonight, I'm going to talk to you about doing DevSecOps with Azure Firewall. So I'm Aidan Finn, and I am a, come on, PowerPoint, you can do it. There we go. I am a Microsoft Valuable Professional, or MVP, with the Azure expertise. This is the end of year 14 for me. Hopefully there'll be a year 15, but nothing's ever guaranteed. I own my own company called Cloud Mechanics, which has been quite quiet the last couple of years. So I've written and delivered Azure training around Europe, mostly in person, which is why it's been kind of quiet. And my day job, I am a principal consultant with a Nordic consulting company called Innofactor. I actually work for the Norway subsidiary, the Oslo office to be precise, where I work with Azure infrastructure, networking, security, governance, all that good stuff. Mostly I get involved with the difficult onboarding projects is the best way of putting it, and doing an awful lot of cloud adoption framework lately, and doing the stuff that I'll be talking about tonight. I've been working in IT since 1996, which officially makes me old. And I've been across the full spectrum of jobs, I guess, in the IT world. Started off as developer, then a consultant, sysadmin, contractor, technical pre-sales trainer, you name it. I've bounced around, done documentation, written books and all that stuff too. And good bit of experience over the years, mostly in the Microsoft world. My blog is on aidanfinn.com. You can learn more about my employer on innofactor.com, my company, cloudmechanics.com, and I'm on Twitter as @Joe_Elway. And I am on LinkedIn, but I just don't remember what I'm called on LinkedIn other than Aidan Finn. That's AIDAN, FINN. Okay. Why you need a firewall? Very briefly. Because a lot of people just think, stick stuff up in Azure and it's safe, right? Dealing with a customer who made that assumption and they were wrong. You do need a firewall. You can look around and you'll find plenty of stories out there. Ransomware is usually in the headlines these days, and ransomware takes advantage of the fact that people have not put adequate network security in place, and taking advantage of human behavior as well. But once they take advantage of the human behavior, the network is so open that this ransomware, which is typically now things like Conti, it's manually controlled rather than just a dumb bot. This stuff spreads very, very quietly and sneakily around your network and is very damaging, and can blackmail you as well by stealing your information. So Norsk Hydro, big company in Norway, they were hit for $40 million. The health service in Ireland, so Ireland's version of the NHS, got stung for 100 million euros, or about £5 these days, and had months of downtime and still has systems that are down. And that attack was last year, I think spring of last year. Another typical approach is thinking that developers and operators without any supervision can do network security. So letting the devs and the ops guys free on the cloud and saying, right, put stuff up there and let's see how it goes. So quite a well-known one was Microsoft. Some developer let an Azure SQL database open on the internet and shared lots of information about customers to the internet. That was very nice of them. There was another one a couple of weeks ago, was revealed in Norway. Almost every citizen who owns property in Norway had their information leaked on the internet with a similar flaw. Developers who just didn't know what they were doing with firewalls and left, I think it was Elasticsearch and SQL, or some form of Azure database open on the internet. We didn't hear the exact details. So you need a firewall. And that firewall is going to protect you north-south. So that's inbound from outside world, internet on premises, and we treat on premises as being as bad as the internet because that's where people are browsing and opening PDF attachments in their Outlook and whatever. We also have the outbound. So we want to isolate and block that as much as possible. So if something does get onto your network, you want to stop it talking to its control plane. The bots out there that are actually giving it instructions. You also want east-west protection, so that you want to stop your individual workloads from talking to each other needlessly. You only want to open up the necessary ports between your workloads. And of course, in Azure, we should be doing our security in depth. So you're also implementing network security groups at the subnet level, not the NIC level. It seems like that would be good practice, but that's actually bad practice. Even though Microsoft Security Center, I refuse to call it Defender for Cloud. So Azure Security Center will tell you implement your network security groups at the NIC level. The network security group people do not tell you to do that because they know it's a bad practice and the amount of network security groups will become impossible to manage and then mistakes will be made. So do it at the subnet level. I've been involved in lots of Azure projects over the years, and as a consultant, I can very successfully give you your landing zone, help you migrate your stuff into the cloud, etc. But what we see is the actual adoption fails. So we can get that business up and running in the cloud, and we hand it over, and we come back 2 years later and we ask them how it is, and we'll get different opinions. So dropping that landing zone, I said, it's great, no problem. Migrating the workloads, complicated, more often than not, but it's achievable. But it's when we hand it over to IT operations, that's when things go wrong. So what do I mean? Well, imagine this scenario. You have a developer, and in this case, she wants to get her new workload online, or she wants to integrate it with some other workloads because workloads talk to each other. So she calls up Central IT and says, hey, I need a firewall rule for my new workload, please. Very helpful person says, sure. Have you opened up a ticket in Jira? Ooh, that's not right. Isn't the cloud meant to be self-service? What? Where? Because the developer thinks the cloud is supposed to be self-service. Is she wrong? I don't think so. Jira, all work items must go to our ITIL process. Very agile. Not. Okay. So I need to open up HTTPS from start to my new AKS workload. Can we do that? Sure. Have you a change control request? Have you got a rollback plan? So can I just get this done because I'm doing something for the business? The directors of this business have asked for this workload, and they've given us a deadline. We, as in IT, we're all kind of trying to work together here. And yeah, we get stuck in a loop. So we're in an infinite loop at this point. So they create the ticket. When will this be done? We're pretty busy. Once security have a look at this, network ops and internal audit look into it. Could be 3 days if you're lucky. Now, that's not good. And that's when the developer turns to their boss and says, IT ops are blocking us. Do you know, even though we're in the cloud, we still can do shadow cloud? And one of my colleagues actually had that experience with a customer last summer. So he and I deployed their Azure infrastructure in the cloud just over 3 years ago. And then last summer, he was contacted by their developers. It's a very big company with international locations. And the developers approached him and said, yep, we love what you did. We just hate how it's run. So can you deploy it for us outside of the control of IT operations so we can run it for ourselves? And that's the sort of thing that you're going to see. So legacy IT, and those of you who've worked in IT long enough know this. Developers, operators are like this. But then you have all the people inside of the IT operations team. So the networking people and the storage people and the Windows people and the Linux people, like Windows and Linux, when have they ever gotten along? You have all these different teams and they just butt heads. You have all these different verticals, all set up in different teams, different corners of the office, or different floors of the building, or even different buildings or different counties, different countries. They don't work with each other. That ends up creating obstacles inside of IT, but also for the business. So now cloud is not delivering on the promise to the business, which was you're supposed to be able to deliver systems fast. So this fail fast approach. Deliver it. If it's working, continue to develop it. If it's not working, step back, have a look to see if you need to go in a different direction. Maybe it's a different direction with the same product, or maybe it's a whole new product altogether and you just cut your losses. Now IT is just, no, you need to open a ticket. And everything is open a ticket. So this is why we need to realign or change how we're doing things. Go to a more agile process. But everybody's heard of DevOps, but there's an extension of that concept, which understands that security needs to be a part of the architecture and the build from day one. It's not something that should be bolted on afterwards, because once a system goes into production, particularly in something like Azure, it's actually, the architecture is kind of rigid. It's not that easy to change. So security needs to be a part of this on day one. So the idea here is we build a virtual team that has the different roles. So you've got your developers, your operations, and your security people working together from concept onwards and continue to run the system as a virtual team. It could be an actual team. Some organizations like General Electric are big enough to have actual teams with all these people in these roles permanently working on particular products. But for the rest of us, it's a virtual concept. So you might only have a couple of, security people in IT. Well, they're going to virtually work in the different teams and have, different, virtual reporting structures and backlogs that they work on to be able to do their jobs. Okay, repeat slide. Don't worry about that. So that's the concept. Now let's look at the technology from the network security side that we can use with that concept. That's the Azure Firewall. The Azure Firewall, for those of you who aren't familiar with it, is a resource from Azure. It's not a third-party firewall. And some of you will go, "Ooh, Microsoft Firewall, I'm running away. I'll come back for the next talk." Trust me, this is very different, and it is actually certified like crazy by different organizations outside of Microsoft to be compliant with their requirements. The big thing I love about the Azure Firewall is it is truly an Azure resource, which means we can deploy it, configure it, and manage it as code. Whatever your preferred language is. If you like ARM, if you like Bicep, if you like Terraform, yada, yada, yada. And I've used all three of those with the Azure Firewall. It is awesome. You don't have to maintain this thing. You don't have to upgrade this thing. It's managed. It's a platform resource. So it's like saying I'm going to use an app service. Underneath is, a Linux container, a Linux VM, a Windows VM. You don't manage the operating system of that thing. You just manage your application. With the Azure Firewall, you manage the configuration of it, the features of it. You manage the rules. You can manage it through Azure Portal if you want to do ClickOps, but my preferred approach is to actually manage it using infrastructure as code. So my configuration sits in a Git repo, whether it's Azure DevOps or GitHub, and it's deployed out using a GitHub workflow or a DevOps pipeline. And from a human point of view, I basically just view the configuration and I have the system deploy the configuration using the code that I write. And as I said, the resource can be deployed as code, the configurations, the features can be managed as code, whether I want to use IDPS, threat intelligence, web category filtering, all that stuff, all managed as code. And then the actual rules. And that's the bit that's interesting tonight, the rules. So the rules, today with Azure Firewall, the way we manage it is through something that's marketing-wise known as Azure Firewall Manager, but as an Azure resource, we're dealing with something called an Azure policy. And that's the actual thing that we're going to deploy as code. That Azure policy is associated with a firewall resource. And effectively, the firewall resource is just a dumb thing. We don't do anything with it. Under the covers, it's a bunch of VMs running special software, special functionality, all aggregated using a load balancer. But we manage that thing using a policy, and that is associated with that firewall resource. That policy contains the feature configuration, and then contains these things called rules collection groups. So rules collection group is one or more rules collections. So what are rules collections? Well, rules collections are different types of rules. So they could be NAT rules. So I want to allow something in and port translate it to a backend pool. It could be network rules. So this is inbound or outbound traffic. Maybe it's TCP something, UDP something, or it's a URI or whatever on any particular port. Or application rules. And this is when we're making an outbound connection to HTTP, HTTPS, or SQL Server. And there's some understanding of that workload from the application rule side of things. That's not a WAF, it's for outbound connections. That child policy is associated with the firewall, but we can actually tier our policies. So we can have a child policy that's associated with the firewall, and maybe we have a security person who manages that firewall. But we could be in a large organization where there could be lots of these firewalls. So maybe I have an Azure hub and spoke architecture in UK South, another one in West Europe, another one in East US, another one in Korea Central. And I have different administrators for each of those firewalls. But as a company, I might say there's certain rules I want to implement. certain features I want to control centrally. And I can do that using a parent policy. So you can see my central administrator up there, she's running a parent policy, which is associated with a child policy. So everything that's put into the parent policy writes through the child policy to the Azure Firewall. From the GUI perspective, it appears like the parent policy features are actually written into the child policy, but as I'll explain later on, they're actually written through into the Azure Firewall. Okay, let's have a look in the Azure portal, and we'll have a quick look at that stuff. So the Azure Firewall is here, and there's not much to it. There used to be a whole GUI here for managing the configuration and the rules and everything. I now refer to that as Classic. So there's very little to it, but we can see that the firewall here is actually managed by a policy. So if I go back out and I can look at my policy, I can see if there's a parent policy or not. In this case, there is not a parent policy. So it's a single policy that's managing the firewall, single tier of management. So maybe I'm just a simple organization. I've got my rules collections. You can see I've got these rules collection groups. So I have different rules collection groups, and I'll explain the logic of these in a little bit. And in here, I've got rules collections. And inside a rules collection, I can specify what type of rule collection it is, or its network. What is its action? Is it going to allow or is it going to deny? What's its priority? Its processing order. Then all the different rules are either going to allow. Think of these as filters. Either filters that are going to allow based on the rule collection action, or deny. So I can change that to a deny action if I wish. And it's a very, very simple architecture. And that's part of the beauty of the Azure Firewall. It might take you, weeks of training to learn how to use a third-party NVA. The Azure Firewall, I can teach someone how to use this thing in under a day, which is part of the beauty of this thing. And when I say teach how to use it, I mean every single feature of this thing. And then the rules. Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt. Someone's just requested if you could just zoom in a little bit on the screen.
Sure.
Thank you.
There we go. There's lots of other features in here, DNS proxy that's used to power the network rules and threat intelligence, which is based on databases, understanding external IP addresses are rogue or not, TLS inspection, where it's using kind of like antivirus, it's using a database of filters to inspect traffic passing through the firewall to see if there's threats or not. Sorry, that's IDPS. TLS inspections when we break into our secure traffic like HTTPS. And we can do things like IDPS to see if there's bad flows going on, and also for the web category filtering stuff as well. So that's a very quick tour of the firewall and the different rules types. So let's go back to the PowerPoint and talk about infrastructure as code. Infrastructure as code. So I showed you there I had different workloads, and each of those different workloads actually had a different rules collection group. So that rules collection group can have the different types of rules collections, and then inside those rules collections are the different filters or rules that we want to either allow or deny. Those rules collection groups are part of the policy, which is then applied to a firewall. And as I said earlier, we could have a parent firewall policy, which has its own rules collection groups and configurations, which write through to the child through to the firewall. But let's focus on the fact that I've broken things up based on workload or service, if you want to use the ITIL term. So I've got workload A, which has its own rules collection group. Workload B, which has its own rules collection group. Workload C, which has its own rules collection group. That's kind of nice and tidy. So now I can organize my rules based on workload, which makes it very easy to go into the GUI and see what's going actually on. But I can extend this a little bit. So I've got that one rules collection group for workload A. All the rules associated with workload A are in that rules collection group. So why don't I take that rules collection group and put it into the repo or the repository that deploys the platform code and the application code for workload A. Now there's a concept. Instead of having the rules with the firewall, put the rules with the workload. Now, if you feel like you're brain has just warped a bit, that's okay, because that's normal. Now, if I think about what my repo is going to do, my repo is going to have pipelines if it's DevOps, or workflows if it's GitHub, and it's going to push out this code, this ARM or Bicep or Terraform or whatever, to the different types of resources. And they may be in different locations. Ooh, another mind warp. They could be even in different subscriptions in my tenant. So I could have my rules collection group going to a subscription and a resource group that contains my firewall and my firewall policy. And then I could have my platform code and my application code going completely somewhere else. Different subscription, different resource groups. Now there's some sort of workflow here, and there's some sort of authentication and authorization. So the workflow or the pipeline needs to authenticate and authorize against these Azure subscriptions or resource groups. We do that using a service principal or an SPN or an application registration if we want to use the term that's in the Azure AD GUI. So I can go into Azure AD, create an application registration, which is a form of credential. I can give it a role or rights to the different subscriptions or resource groups, which means now when the pipeline executes, it's able to go to those different locations and deploy things. So let's have a look at a repository. So I have been using DevOps for this stuff. I've got a workload called Spoke 1. So if I go into my platform folder, we can see that I have a whole bunch of different things. So I'm deploying my network and some other bits we'll talk about later. And you can see I've got a specific Bicep file for deploying a rules collection group. So let's zoom this in so it's a bit clearer. So I can deploy a rules collection group. Now it's taking in two parameters, actually three. So the name of the rules collection group, the priority, and then the rules collections, which is the grouping of rules based on logical function that I want to deploy in this rules collection group. Now this is all taken from my parameters file, which is written in ARM, unfortunately, not in Bicep. It's just the way Bicep templates work. You can see that I'm going to call this thing Spoke 1. So that's the name of my workload, and it's going to be a sub-resource of my Azure Firewall policy. It's going to have a priority of 1000, which is its processing order of the rules collection group versus the other rules collection groups. And then inside that, I'm going to create rules collections. So I'm going to have a network rules. So I can see I'm going to allow outbound connectivity to smcp.office365.com, TCP 25, which the eagle-eyed people will know that's a use of support for that particular functionality. And I'm creating an application rule. So this is outbound HTTP or HTTPS connectivity. And I'm going to say, yeah, I want to allow access to GitHub on HTTPS. And I want to allow access to some site.com on HTTPS. And who's doing this? Is it the firewall admin? No, it's the developers, the operators, the security person who's a part of the team for developing Spoke 1, my workload. This is the cool thing. So when I'm able to delegate this out now I'm going to talk about controls and compliance for those of you who are thinking, Aidan, didn't you just say developers and operators are the wrong people to be doing this? And I did. But remember, a security person should be part of this now, or someone with basic security training should be a part of this process now. And this should be visible to the developers and the operators, and maybe they can even contribute to this, but we're still going to have some controls over it. Okay, back to the PowerPoint. So, first thing we want to do is make sure we don't give away too much privilege. So that service principal that's got to be deploying the code for me needs to have as little privilege or rights as possible. Now, the lazy approach is, okay, I'm going to give that thing just owner rights or contributor rights to everything. So for example, where my firewall is sitting, the hub, typically in a hub and spoke architecture, I'm just going to give that credential full rights in there. You don't need to, and you shouldn't, because now at this point, the thing has too much rights, and if someone was able to slip through something they shouldn't, they could actually do some damage. So we want to make sure that this thing is really limited to what it can actually do. So the correct method is figure out or have a dedicated SPN for each workload or each GitHub workflow or every DevOps pipeline. Determine the minimum rights for that thing to be able to do what it needs to do. So if I'm, for example, deploying rules collection groups to an Azure Firewall policy, that's all I should be doing. I shouldn't be able to actually configure the firewall features. I shouldn't be able to turn off, threat intelligence or reconfigure TLS inspection or any of that stuff. I should be able to create, delete, modify rules collection groups, and that's it. Grant those rights to an Azure AD security group or groups, and then add the SPN to those Azure AD security groups. So this is very classic approach to granting rights in the Microsoft world. Grant the rights to a group, add some entity into that group so it inherits those rights. But in the real world, there is more than the Azure Firewall policy. So if you take this approach, there's a bunch of other things you're going to do in a typical hub and spoke architecture. So to force your flows from site-to-site networking through the Azure Firewall, and this is kind of a deep dive on routing type conversation, you need to add a route into the gateway subnet route table. So whatever the CIDR or the address space is of the spoke virtual network, you need to add that as a prefix into a user-defined route in that gateway subnet route table. So somebody's got to do that. Is that something you're going to say to the firewall admin, do that for me? Or are you going to allow your workloads pipeline to do that for you? You want to peer your spoke with the hub. Peering is a two-way thing. The spoke needs to peer with the hub, but the hub needs to peer back to the spoke. So who's going to do that? Again, we can configure it so the spoke can actually do that peering back from the hub. And then the SPN also needs to be able to have rights to manage deployment jobs. So if you go into a resource group and then deployment jobs, you can see the history of the deployments that have been done. It's kind of your state engine in the ARM world or the Microsoft BISAP world. And your deployment needs to be able to create those, view those, and manage those. Because that's who does it, is your deployment job. So we're going to have to create some custom roles with these rights. Now you can find these up on my GitHub. I have the link here, and I'll have a shorter path to the link at the end of the slides as well, which you'll see. So for the Azure Firewall policy, we're going to grant the ability to create, delete, and read rules collection groups. That's it. Gateway subnet route table. We're going to grant rights to create, delete, and read routes. Virtual network, we're going to grant rights to create, delete, and read peering. And then in the resource group that these things are all in, the hub resource group, if we call it that, we're going to grant rights to be able to manage the deployment jobs for that resource group. We have those roles, and then we assign or create a user group for each of those roles in Azure AD. Then we take our service principal or our Azure AD app registration and drop it into each of those groups. Now you can do that either directly like in this diagram or via a nested Azure AD group. So you might have another group that's a member of each of these 5 groups and just drop in that service principal into that one group. So it inherits indirectly the rights that are granted to the workload itself, where the SPN is probably going to need owner rights to be able to create everything and assign rights and all that stuff that you need to do for the workload. But then the firewall policy, the route table for the gateway subnet, peering on the hub VNet, and then the deployment operator roles or features in the hub resource group. Now, let's have a look at what this actually looks like. We are going to look at the permissions. So if we go to the portal, actually, let's have a look at the GitHub repo. So my GitHub is github.com/Aidan Finn. And you will find a repo in there called Shared Azure Firewall. Drill into bicep DevSecOps. You'll see a folder in here called Custom Roles. And if we look at any one of these, so let's have a look at the rules collection groups one for the Azure Firewall policy. You can see the 3 actions that are being allowed are related to rules collection groups. So we're saying you can read, write, and delete. So if you're doing Terraform, your infrastructure as code can actually delete resources for you. And that's all we're allowing. So none of the other features of the firewall policy are actually being managed or delegated using this custom role, which is kind of cool. We're really limiting what can actually be done. And we have a bunch of others, as I said. If we go back out here and have a look at my firewall policy. Oh, I love it when. Let's go back here and role assignments. We can see I have a custom role here for the Azure Firewall policy, and it is granted to a group. If I look at the group and its members, I will find I actually have done the nested group approach. So let's have a look at that group and its members. You will see I have a SPN here, a service principal called DevOps-Spoke1. You see there's other ones there as well, but that's the one that we're focusing on at the moment, DevOps-Spoke1. So it has rights now through this nested group thing, the role assignment, to create rules collection groups in my Azure Firewall policy. And that's it, nothing else, except for the other custom roles that I've granted. So if we go back to my resource groups, have a look at my hub network and role assignments, you can see we have the ability to do my manage the deployments. So these things for my workload. You can see I've been running stuff in the past. So there's the one we're going to be focusing on tonight. And if we come back out and have a look at the VNet and access control, role assignments, you can see there's the custom role for allowing peering. And it goes on and on. So it's basically a repetition of what I've just shown you in the PowerPoint. Okay. So the tech, believe it or not, is actually the easy bit. The hard bit is the human element, the process, the people and process. So let's take a look at the process that you actually want to get to. I have a workload and it's in a main branch in a Git repo, DevOps, GitHub, whatever. And that's my production code, and it's locked. It's what we refer to as protected, which means I can't just go in there and edit it. Because if I do edit it successfully, it's automatically going to roll out the deployments out to my production environment. And I want some sort of process to protect that code, to stop stupid people doing stupid things, or people who are tired doing things they shouldn't be doing. So over on the left, I've got my dev, my sec, my ops, working as a virtual team. And they come along and they create a branch of that main branch. So some development branch. Now this is a copy that's sitting on their machine and it's synchronized up into the repo as well. And this is a thing that can be edited because it isn't actually being deployed out. So I can edit away in here. I can create my rules and store them in here. And when I'm done with it, I can do what's called a pull request. So this is when I send my code and I want to merge it back into the main branch. But because the main branch is protected, some reviewers have to review my code before it actually is merged in. So my evil security officer is having a look at it, at the billions and billions of lines of code. My application architect and my platform architect, security officers, change control, whatever is right for your organization are going to review this code. So my firewall admin is now looking at the code. So they're still in control. So the dev, the sec, the ops can create the rules they want, but the firewall admin's job is now reviewing the rules. If they like the rules, yeah, cool. But if they don't like the rules, they send them back. Sorry, your code is not getting into production. Go fix whatever's wrong with it. And if we fix it, it gets merged back into the main branch. And if you've set it all up, that might push out automatically. Now you could still set this up as maybe a timed task that happens outside of maintenance or busy hours or whatever, a quiet period maintenance window. but it's very common to see this thing just push out live once it's done. And of course, just like in SharePoint, your branches are versioned so that each of the commits is there as a history. So if there's a problem with the code, we can roll it back very easily and it will automatically deploy out. So you have all that change control process. My code reviewers are the change control people. My rollback is I just go back to a previous version of my main branch. So we're still satisfying the needs of ITIL, but we've made it more agile because my dev, my sec, and my ops are now writing the rules for themselves. They're not having to wait on the firewall admin to write the rules. The firewall admin now has less work to do. They're a reviewer of the rules. They still manage the configuration of the firewall and any global rules that need to be done. But for the individual workloads, they are reviewers. They're more of a security officer. Now, to make all this work, that's the hard bit. Because what I've found is most organizations where there's a cloud migration going on, that is being driven by IT operations. The same people who want to lock everything down and continue what they've done in their physical data centers up in the cloud. If you're going to go with this more agile approach, the project actually needs to start realistically at a higher level. So we look at the Microsoft Cloud Adoption Framework. The key part of that is define strategy, which is where you go directly to the leadership of the organization, not the IT manager, but to the leadership of the organization and say, why do you want to go to cloud? What is it you want out of it? Then that directly impacts what you do in the plan phase. And in particular for us, the organizational alignment. How are you going to run what you're going to do in the cloud? Who's going to be trained? How are they going to be educated? What roles are you going to fill from outside of the organization through hiring or through partnership? That's where you enable the process. And by engaging first with the leadership, anyone who resists gets their head knocked. And you can make the process work. And to be quite honest, when I've shown this to firewall admins, including in government, they've been like, I like this because I'm going to be doing less. And I'm not going to be the bottleneck on the organization. My role is actually going to be more important because I'm more of a security officer than just some firewall admin. And I have less day-to-day maintenance to do because I'm using a platform resource rather than some third-party thing where I now have to skill up on that and have two different support channels, not just one. So the firewall admin's job, as I said, is changing. And with the process changes, it means security needs to be something that's in every team. So that it needs to be someone, whether they're a member of the team or they're virtually a part of the team, someone who has a security role. They have to have some basic firewall rules training, like how to create rules, why rules should be precise and not just general, allow star from star to star. You don't want that sort of thing. And they're actually going to be working on more than just the Azure Firewall because they're also going to be working on the network security group, so that free firewall at the subnet level. All the code they write is subject to review by the pull request. And if you want, you can use Azure Firewall policy to avoid bypasses like people setting up public IP addresses and NAC gateways and all that stuff and force your traffic through the hub. So let's have a look very quickly, keeping in mind the time, how this process actually works. So if I go back to my firewall policy and my rules collections, I can see Spoke 1 does not have a rules collection group. Okay, I showed you a rules collection group here for Spoke 1. So if I go into my pipelines and I run my Spoke 1 rules collection group, and this was working at 5 minutes past midnight last night, or this morning technically. Hopefully this will work. And I'm going to let that run. We'll come back to it in a moment. And then we'll have a look at the actual process of how I can create rules and stuff like that. So very, very quickly, hopefully, if the guys don't give out to me too much. So one technical gotcha I want to talk about. So we talked about this concept of child policy or a firewall policy, which is associated with a firewall. And in theory, I can have a parent policy, which inherits into the child policy. Everything in here writes to the firewall or through the firewall to some backend highly available storage. So all the rules, all the configurations, they're not in the policy really. From your code point of view, they're in the policy, but actually in the platform, they're sitting in some highly available back-end storage behind the firewall. So the way to think of this is in the Cisco world, you could write, a firewall rule or a switch configuration or whatever, but it didn't apply until you commit it. So it's written to some storage. It's the same here. When I deploy my firewall policy, it is being committed to some back-end storage. And until it's actually committed, it doesn't actually apply. So it's just sitting in a repo or whatever. Or I'm thinking about it before writing it in the Azure Firewall policy without clicking apply or save. So it always writes true to that backend storage. And in doing so, it locks the storage, which creates a scenario where if two people try to create configurations in the same firewall at the same time, the second one is going to fail. So the first one is going to succeed by locking the firewall and doing whatever it needs to do. The second one, if it comes along while that job is going on, it will fail because the firewall is locked. So when you've got lots of people all trying to deploy things at the same time on the firewall, in theory, you could have that scenario. What I've seen so far is not that common. The thing to really watch out for is a feature in Azure Firewall called IP groups. Really nice idea where we could abstract IP addresses and CIDRs using a resource and just reuse the resource name. Problem is the way they work. Reality is people have a lot of them and they tend to get updated quite frequently. Depending on how you write your code, they all could get updated every time you do a deployment of your rules configuration. And they have to be done consecutively. They can't be done in parallel because they are part of the firewall configuration. So you have to do them consecutively, which could be a very long deployment job. So what I would say is avoid IP groups. And secondly, remember that every team is potentially a firewall admin at this point. So look into the code that you're running in your pipeline. So a pipeline or a workflow is normally not just some basic thing that just does a task. It's usually a PowerShell script or some form of script. And you can build intelligence into that. So maybe you can build a retry process into your pipeline to say, right, I'm going to try this deployment. And if it doesn't work straight away because of a timeout error or a lock error, I'm going to wait so many minutes and then try it again. And hopefully the Azure Firewall team who are aware of these issues will actually find a solution for us. So before I wrap up, so I can actually see that the firewall rules have actually deployed and the job is cleaning up. So if I come back in here, let's force a refresh, we should find there is spoke 1 and there are our rules. Now, if the guys are okay, they can jump in and tell me to stop talking. They heard me joking about that earlier because I normally have to tell someone to tell me to stop talking. I'll continue if they don't want me to stop. Is that okay, guys? Or would you like me to stop?
No, crack on.
Yeah,
okay,
crack on.
I'll be another minute or so. So I'm going to show you the process of, all right, I want to make a change. So I'm the dev or the sec or the op person in my team. And I'm probably doing this in VS Code, but just to speed things up, I'm going to do it directly in the repo. So I have my code here and I would like to edit it. But as I said, my main branch is protected. So I'm going to create a branch. Let's call it demo and create. And then I'm going to edit my code. And let's say that this is going to be M366 because it's one better. Because Microsoft one's no good and I need to account for leap years. So click commit. And I should be putting in all my comments and stuff in here from my reviewers. So now I've created a commit and I can create a pull request. So this is where I'm going to say I would like my code to be reviewed and merged if it's okay. So I'm going to do that again. I should put in comments and associating that with stuff in my backlog. Now I'm a different persona. So now I am the firewall admin or the security officer, the application architect, whatever. And it could be a selection of people who need to actually approve this. So I've got a very simple environment. It's just me. And I'm going to say, you know what? I'm going to look at the files and you know what? There's the changes. That's very easy for me to see. I can view the whole file if I want, but I'm just focusing on the changes. I can see they're getting rid of that and they're replacing it with that. Okay, that seems okay with me. I'm good with that. I know we've got a contract with that organization and we should be having this communication path. So I'm going to approve and we complete the merge. So what's going to happen now? Well, because of the way I've written my pipeline, it's detected a change to the main branch. So it is now deploying my code automatically. No human is involved in deploying the code. I could set my production environment to read only, which is kind of cool. Now, it looks like we're waiting on a container to spin up, and it will spin up and we'll let it do its thing, and we'll come back to it in a moment. So very quickly, all the code for this demo lab, everything. So if you want to build the hub and spoke architecture, all the roles and everything, you can find that on my GitHub. So github.com/Aidan Finn. Look for a repo called shared Azure Firewall, and there's only one firewall or folder in there, which is called Bicep DevSecOps. You can guess that my plan is at some point when I can find free time, which is kind of laughable because I have 1.5-year-old twins. Someday I'm going to add other languages in there. Well, Terraform, hopefully. You need 2 repos to be able to run this. So one for the hub and one for the spoke. Each should have an Azure AD service principal or app registration. You're going to deploy the hub code or deploy the hub using the code, then manually create the roles in Azure AD and assign them to your Spoke 1 SPN. Ideally do that using groups, and then you deploy Spoke 1. And you have the same demo lab that I've just been showing you right there. So you can see right now, this thing is deploying firewall roles, which is cool. Let's see if it's effective yet. So sometimes we just need to do this to convince it. And there we go, office366.com. All done as code, all with a change control process. And that's it. That is how to do DevSecOps with the Azure Firewall in 45-ish plus 5 minutes. So thanks very much. It's been a pleasure talking to everyone today. So you can find me on Twitter on @joe_elway, and you can find my blog on aidanfinn.com. Thanks, guys.
Thanks very much, Aidan. Fantastic presentation, as always, and I've seen several of your presentations, and they've always been fantastic. So massive thank you for coming on tonight and sharing that with us.
Pleasure.
I've noticed there's some questions in the chat. I think Stuart had a few. Just find them. Or Stuart, do you want to come on, Mike, or Cam, and ask your questions?
Yeah, I can do. It was just a case of, well, what in terms of firewalls and routers and switches and stuff, you've got more than just some rules. And what about security, like DKIM, if you were going to do Office 365 stuff, and then going to the Office 365 next level, it's like, well, what about multi-tenant? What about Google? How are you going to specify that? And then if you're doing how much you're going to spend is in the code, but that was actually mentioned in the chat. So those were the sort of the vein of the questions.
Okay. Google is just firewall rules from my point of view. It's just another external network. So that's easy for me. It's just a URI and a port and a protocol from the firewall perspective.
So you can't specify which tenant you can talk to or anything like that? The same as like DLP protection sort of rules?
No, you can't. So this is a network firewall. It's not doing anything like clouds. What's CAS called? What's the full name for CAS or any of those things? This is just part of your overall solution. So we'll never say that the firewall is the be all and end all. You need different layers of protection. So for example, at the network layer in Microsoft Azure, I would be saying, yeah, you need the hub firewall, but you also need a web application firewall. Even if you was using third-party NVAs, I'd be saying, yeah, great, go and use your Checkpoint or your Palo Alto. But you know what? You're going to need something like a Netscaler/ADC or a F5 Big IP to publish your HTTPS workloads to the internet securely, which are probably also going to just flow through your firewall, so you can do your IDPS or IDS or whatever the marketing terminology is for it. So you've got actually 2 levels of protection for your workloads, and if you account for your NSGs, 3, and your resource firewalls, 4.
So what about like
you also have your
grabbing the
other
traffic?
What do you mean by grabbing the traffic?
So you're fault finding an issue. You're looking through the rules. You're saying why is it hitting that rule? Why is this traffic here? What is in that traffic? I'm looking
that's all
for
log
a particular
analytics.
host.
That like every Azure resource, the Azure Firewall sends its logs to Log Analytics, and that's where you find all that information. And then, of course, that can be synced in with your Microsoft Sentinel, which means you're getting 2 sets of value out of that one configuration. So you're doing your troubleshooting with that data, but you're also doing your SIEM with that data too.
Is that okay, Stuart?
Thank you.
Yeah. I mean, I suppose the whole thing around it is this: why we have the Microsoft security stack. It's not just one project. There's many projects that all fill in all the different pieces. Shaq, you there, mate? You got a question?
Yeah. First, I want to say great presentation.
Thanks.
But my question is, I know you were talking about using the Azure Firewall, but in your experience, without going into your client's details or anything, or just your overall experience, how do you feel like you're mentioning Palo Alto, and how do you like if you come across environments, or if someone were to say to you like, oh, we don't want to use Azure Firewall, we'd rather use like Palo Alto or some other third-party firewall, like or a cloud-based firewall, like what is your thoughts on that?
So most of my customers have said that. It's always Palo Alto for some reason. And I've successfully put Azure Firewall into every single one of them. When I explain that the skill side of things is not going to be a problem anymore, that they're not going to have to go out and hire a Palo Alto specialist or a managed service provider who specializes in just firewalls. Azure Firewall is the sort of thing that I can teach you everything in Azure Firewall in under a day. And they're not sacrificing functionality. In fact, they're gaining, because now they're able to manage their firewall as code with DevSecOps, which they're never going to be able to do with a third-party firewall. When you start going through that stuff and simplified support, okay, we can question the quality of that support. If you're working with Microsoft Cloud Services, you'll definitely question the quality of it. But the fact that it's a single support vendor, and you're not going to have this finger pointing thing where Palo Alto might turn around and go, well, that's something wrong with the Azure network. And the Azure networking guys, it could be turn around and go, well, there's something wrong with the firewall. It's much easier at this point. And the fact that everything is just so integrated. So I can take my log data, send to my log analytics, and it's automatically going into my SIEM. This deep integration, the simplicity of it, the lower entry point in terms of skills, which means I can expand the knowledge out to more people and enable DevSecOps with the fact that, yeah, more people can do this and its infrastructure as code. It has won for me every single time, including one organization who were huge skeptics of the idea. I've only had one person who resisted and even tried to sabotage the project. But he was in love with Cisco, even though that Cisco firewalls in Azure, in any cloud networking, are probably classified as sabotage anyway. If you like downtime and lots of it, that's a good way to go.
Yeah, I think the problem is sometimes it's change, and some people don't like change it. And from conversations I've had as well, I think some people, until they fully understand, they may feel like their job's a threat because of this new technology.
But that's the thing. It's not actually the product that's made that person an expert. It's their understanding of security. And we can up their value from being a person who creates rules to someone who manages security. And so they become a more senior person if they take this approach. And that's, that government customer I mentioned earlier, I dealt with them the second half of last year. And when I was doing the Palo Alto versus Azure Firewall thing with them and I was watching him on Teams, I thought he was ready to slit my throat. And at the end of the presentation, he was like, I love it. I was like, oh, because he saw the value in it for him. He was going to have less mundane, boring activity, which was always a backlog for him, which he could never clear. And he was going to up his own value. He wasn't just going to be the firewall admin. He was now going to be a security officer.
Yeah. It's people seeing the benefits of this technology. Just trying to get across to them. But massive thank you again, Aidan. Pleasure having you on.
I think, Aidan, there's another point relevant to what you're saying there, though, as well. So we've got some Palo NVAs at the minute, and we're just about to onboard Express Route and things, and we've yet to decide which route we're going down, whether it's NVAs or Azure Firewall. The problem I find with the Palos is that because somebody else looks after them, it's like a black box, and I've got no transparency of the configs on them or not. Only to discover the other week I had a problem with SQL, as in Azure SQL, where it was letting traffic through, then blocking it because it was bouncing around the Azure data center from different IPs. And I was like, why is it working sometimes and why is it not working? And it was only when I eventually got hands on somebody to go look and eventually get them to stare at it that we discovered the problem and had to whitelist some Azure IPs to fix it. But it's like I was getting people yell at me saying we can't do data stuff because we can't connect, or we connect and then it disconnects. And I'm like, I don't know, everything looks all right from what I can see, and then discovered this other bit going on.
I can answer that fairly quickly. In Azure Firewall, have a look at service tags and FQDN tags.
Yeah, I don't have any fear about doing it with Azure Firewall. It was just because it was in Palo, it was.
Yeah, you don't have that functionality.
Yeah. And once he found it in the log, he was about to say, oh, it's all okay, and then suddenly saw a thing, and it was because it kept detecting the traffic in one hand as being encrypted, which it always was, but then because it came from a different IP, it decided it didn't like it and it blocked it. So it wasn't a pleasant experience, frankly.
Okay, guys, we're going to move on. We've got our next speaker coming up. So just want to say a massive thank you again, Aidan, for taking your time up to join us tonight. While we have got everyone, just before we introduce our next speaker, Dwayne Natwick is here tonight with us. He's running a community on Discord via Pact, the book publishers that you may be aware of. Some of you may have seen their brands out there out and about. Everyone who is here tonight in attendance, you will receive a copy of Dwayne's SC300 or his brand new launched SC900 as an ebook. And there'll also be 10 lucky random drawn people will receive a voucher for a physical copy. And you see Dwayne's just joined us there. Hi, Dwayne.
Hello. Yep. Yeah, a bunch have already joined, I see, on the server. So I'll give everybody a quick walkthrough at the end of the second presenter real quick. But yeah, and if I've reached out to you and you've joined this community previously, fill out the form and I'll get you an ebook copy. I was given from Pact enough vouchers to cover 50 people, and there's 30 on the call, so everybody gets at least an ebook.
So thanks very much for that, Dwayne. I'm looking forward to hearing more about it. Okay, so we're going over to Karinne, if I pronounced that right.
Karinne, yeah.
Karinne, apologies. Funny enough,
No
before
problem.
we started tonight, we were talking about pronunciation of people's names. So thanks for joining us, and we'll hand over to you.
Excellent. I think I'm going to go ahead and just share my screen because I'll be going between demo and PowerPoint here.
Yeah,
So let's
go
get
ahead.
started here. And I do apologize if my voice gives out. I had COVID last week, and it does kind of destroy your voice, but I do have some tea, but I may have to pause once in a while for my throat to catch up.
No worries. Just hope you're feeling better. I think
Yeah,
many of us
so
have had it now.
it wasn't terribly long. Like, it was only like 2 or 3 days that I slept and barely remember, but it's the throat after, which has not been my favorite. Let's see. For some reason, it's not seeing my other monitor. There it is. Let me know when you can see it.
Yeah, fantastic.
Great. And I did mix up the time, so I won't always be facing the camera because I'm using my webcam on my laptop. But we'll go ahead and get started. If we have any questions along the way, we can pause and answer any of those questions. I like interactions. It makes the presentation more fun for me and for everyone else that's probably having the same question. So to get started here, the presentation is on Microsoft security or 365 security features that you should probably think about starting to incorporate if you don't already. There are versions of this throughout most of the license sets. Some features are only available for E3 and E5 with those enhanced security. A little bit about myself. I'm actually a technologist for VM Software, but I specialize in the Microsoft 365 suite for my team. I manage our environment for my team and get to pretty much go in and break stuff, which is kind of how I learned where some of these were. I also like various other things. One of my big hobbies is actually rock climbing, which I am doing a course right after we get off here, which I'm super excited about. And to start with the presentation, I like to kick off with the kinds of threats and the mindset that we should have going into any security topic whatsoever, which is knowing your security landscape and keeping a balance of security versus usability of your infrastructure. One of the biggest things that we saw, especially during the pandemic and everyone was kind of moving to home, is learning about 0 days and vulnerabilities and things that they happen fast, and there really is no way around it but protecting yourself and how you're going to have an execution and plan after that. The next thing is about your global and remote workers. We had a lot of people that traveled prior to the pandemic, but arguably we had an even harder job, especially with the more layman of our employees when they became work from home. Letting them know, hey, it's not okay to let your kid download Minecraft and, Log4 is now infiltrating all of your company data because it's now on this laptop. The last thing is an excess of privileged user accounts. We'll go over some of the recommendations from Microsoft when it comes to these accounts and some words of wisdom that I've kind of gained over time. Before I was in a technologist role, I was actually a support for many years of my life. I did desktop support, point of sale support. I did support for Veeam, which means I saw a lot of ransomware and types of attacks that happened due to these privileged accounts. So we'll be able to unpack some of that knowledge here. Keeping in mind with your data, I think Triad, or the CIA Triad, is one of the best descriptions of keeping the best policies and practices in mind while making sure you're still allowing availability to the data to the people that need access to those data. So as we go through and you're thinking, oh, this would be great to put into my infrastructure, having real conversations on the impact it'll have to your end users is going to be really critical. And let's go ahead and get into it. So a lot of us ran into conversations. Could you just learn Microsoft 365 pretty much overnight, have deployments, make sure you have privileged, people can talk to who they need to talk to and what type of organization? And we'll cover from a high level. And I like to start with each of these sections a question. And the first one here is about every administrator needing to be a global administrator to do their job. The answer in this case is false. There are tons of different kinds of administrator accounts, and there's some access that global administrators can't really do. So if you have someone in charge of creating a knowledge base through like Viva Learn and managing that content, the global administrator doesn't have the same rights and inflection to be able to update and manage that content as a knowledge administrator. Same thing, granularly giving out permissions for SharePoint admin when necessary, or if you just have a guy that needs to log in to reset passwords, there's just a password administrator. We'll cover a little bit later and have a demo of this, but not having that account active all the time in cases using just-in-time access or conditional access parameters in order to access these elevated account becomes crucial. So the first part here is going to be the best practices. According to Microsoft documentation, you should have no more than 4 global administrators. Now, these global administrators, the 4 global administrators include what's called a break glass account. A break glass account is an account that you do not sign into under any circumstance unless you need to do a privileged access because you've locked yourself out through either another conditional access policy, an expired password. Maybe you broke your phone and and it's the only one that has the ability to log in with the multi-factor authentication. This break glass account should be monitored but never logged into unless absolutely necessary. And that's included in your 4 global administrators. And if you have people that need to do additional jobs in your organization, take a close look at the other privileged administrator and content access. Yes. Raise your hand or post questions. It's a great call out. The next point here for best practice is never use the same user account that you use to log into your everyday email or one second. It looks like we do have a question here. How often should access be tested on the break glass account? So I assume you mean logging in to make sure it still is active and has access to your infrastructure. If you have a cycle for testing in case of disaster scenarios, this account should be a part of your disaster scenario account testing program. So if you do that every month, having a specified time to log in every month of those credentials during the disaster recovery would be a good way to incorporate this account. You will want to add Microsoft account monitoring for login, so other administrators maybe in the group get notified when this account is used and they know that time of the month it's going to be used for this testing. Would be my recommendation. It is subjective to the organization though. Back to the user accounts and administrative accounts. If you're using an account to log into your email every day, your phone, your desktop, other machines, any service account, none of these accounts should have the administrative access by default. If you do need to have an account with a license or you need your account to have that privilege, I would recommend putting what's called just-in-time access in or additional requirements on that account if there's no workaround to having a separate administrative account to do administration in your organization. The next thing is enforcing a password policy and a password policy that makes sense. So don't make your password policy something where your users have to reset their password every few weeks and taking away all of these other qualifications, because you're going to end up having users creating very simplistic passwords that have a rotational numeric character to it. And you're also going to have a bunch of people calling you for password resets. Every time you do a reset cycle, you're not necessarily making yourself more secure. You would be better off having a password policy that is comfortable enough for your end users, but has some sort of rotational cycle, like maybe every 3 months. Then having them do something additional like multi-factor authentication to give an extra level of security to that account, on top of training for what is a good password and bad password. The next thing is about conditional access and multi-factor authentication. These are going to be something we dive into a little bit more once we loop back into the deep dive sections. The next question and section we'll talk about is going to be threats that you cannot mitigate threats based off of a bring your own device policy. And this has been a big misconception. Either you have an all or nothing type of policy for your organization. Either you can't let users do something or you have to give them access. And this isn't true when you get into mobile application management. Mobile application management means you do not have to manage their device, but you can put parameters onto the devices themselves, like conditional access, where if something is jailbroken or doesn't meet the compliance, you can then exclude them from being able to log into an application. We also prevent against exfiltration if you want to put a data loss policy on your application data to prevent it from being copied out of your organization. And there's many features here that you can get into when you start to get into the mobile application management, which is a little bit more granular than the mobile device management. Mobile device management does give you access to the device, but you do need it to be added to the domain in order to get features like remote device wiping, locating lost devices, and putting a walled garden in the form of app restriction onto those devices. I'm just reading here if we have any other questions, and it looks like we have some people getting those answered for us here, which is good. And if those weren't enough reasons to go ahead and implement some type of device management policy in your organization, you're able to store your BitLocker keys in Azure AD. And I don't know how many times throughout my career working with desktop support where we didn't have a centralized Intune organization management of these keys. A end user drops their laptop, the hard drive still recoverable in theory if they hadn't lost the flash drive, or you're like, put BitLocker on here. And they're like, you mean I really had to save that key? You didn't have that for me? Well, this makes it super easy and it keeps it controlled to their account so you can always recover their data from their hard drive when necessary. And the last section we will be covering will be around log analytics. And the question here is a little silly in the fact Azure has advanced log analytics built in. The answer is yes. They have all kinds of advanced log metrics that you're able to initiate based off of default policies. There's advanced policies and extensions that you can send out on not just your devices, but virtual machines and the Azure components out there. These will allow you to do data collections, and from these data collections, you can migrate them into workspaces. From workspaces, you can then start doing alert policies, policy management, who can or can't do X, Y, and Z within these policies, and keep track of it. My favorite part about this is you're able to then add it to your dashboard that you first log in. So if you have something that you need to keep track of, users that might not, or users that have problems or flagged accounts, you could have a list on what I call the coffee screen once you start modifying your initial logged in screen. With the Security and Compliance Center, which actually is now the Security Center and the Compliance Center, it got so big and so much information added that Microsoft split these into 2 separate centers. In the Compliance Center, you're able to access the Microsoft security reports. These reports can show any type of configured logs. You can logins or inappropriate logins from different locations, and be able to track those down in the audit search log. Once you've determined where the account is, what the account is, you can then audit what they actually accessed once they logged in to the system. And we'll kick off each of these sections. This is a good pause point if we have any questions before we get too deep into those 3 categories. Which I don't see anything in here. Sounds good. All right, we'll kick it off inside of the admin and user account conversation. I mentioned this a couple times, but that's because it's so important. Just-in-time access is one of my absolute favorite tools in the security side of the Microsoft 365 environment. Just-in-time access allows me to give temporary elevated privilege access to an account that is an everyday user and either require a second set of eyes, so creating a 4 eyes rule, or at least giving the initiation of requesting the access in order to do privileged management inside of your infrastructure. You can either do temporary accounts, you can do ephemeral accounts, and then you can do the brokered access. And we'll take a look at this. There is limited access to Windows and VMs with these types of accounts, and you're able to see the history and the audit log of the access and the request to access, as well as who approved the access when you start making this management system. And I'll go ahead and get started here. And we'll start inside of the Admin Center for Azure AD. If you don't know how to get there, if you go to your regular Microsoft Admin Center, here on the left-hand side, you should see your additional admin centers, which includes your Azure AD access. From here, you're able to then select all services. I have added my privileged identity management and conditional access here on the left. But if you haven't already added that, under all services and security, you're able to find that same window in here. And we'll go ahead and click on the privileged identity management and give ourselves a little bit more room. Microsoft's been really good about adding in a quick start relations. Thank you. I love the privileged identity management and initiating that just-in-time access. So the first thing to do is activating the just-in-time access or managing the different accesses in your organization. This account has the ability to modify roles. And what we'll be taking a look at is actually going to be the user administrator role. And before we give access, we will take a look at this, and it will be given to Violet. We can edit the description, or excuse me, the role settings. And role settings is where you get to determine if you're going to automatically allow users to gain access without an additional level of approver, or you can set the maximum amount of time, whether or not you need to give a justification, and several other settings. Each of these are able to be modified. They do take some time once you modify them. I have seen it a maximum of about 2 hours to take effect. I was doing demos before where I was trying to hot swap these and show the changes between them in the infrastructure, but that's actually not possible. So once we have the user account here, and we can take a look at adding an assignment, what adding an assignment looks like. So adding this administrator user role assignment, we can either do it by directory or administrative unit. Select the user here, and we'll take a look at BR just to see what the process looks like. Once you've added the user or the administrative unit that you want to assign the conditional role to, you can either make it eligible or active. Eligible means that you're going to have the ability to ask for this permission. If it's going to be active, that means it's going to be active all the time for this user based on this specified window. So they don't have to request it, but you know maybe a project is going on for a period of time and you don't want to forget to revoke user access from that user. You can do active and then from time to time. My organization does require the multi-factor authentication for elevated privilege access for anyone that has it permanently active. So we'll go ahead and leave this on just eligible and assign, and we should see them pop up here on this list. And we do. So now that we have it configured, let's head over to the Violet account to see what it looks like from her side to be able to request access. And just to reiterate the point, if you don't have any administrative access, you're actually not able to get into what is the administration portal here, where we clicked on the Active Directory. So we'll go over and we'll have to go to the aadportal.azure.com. From here, and we'll make this a little larger, we'll have to go into Privileged Identity Management under Violet. Look at my roles, and I can see that I have the ability to ask for this user administrator account. We'll hit active, and remember back from that previous screen, I can only have a duration maximum of an hour. I have to put a reason because I specified there has to be a justification and a reason. So it could be a ticket number, which is kind of what I recommend for tracking. That way you have multiple people initiating, okay, this is okay. And if you know, I'm going to go to lunch and I don't want this to become active until XYZ in time because I'm going to start this project as soon as I get back from lunch and give the admins time to get access here, you can do a custom active time so you have it when you need it. We'll go ahead and hit active here, and it'll send this request for access over to our other account here. And we're logged back in on this browser into the main account, and we should get the approved request. Now this does take some time, but luckily this popped up pretty immediately, and we can see the reason here. And when I hit approve, because I require justification under those role settings, I do have to put a justification, ticket number, reason, or request. It's possible that I have to reach out to their manager to say, hey, this person requested access, whatever the policy might be. And I hit confirm. Now, if you do have justification required and you do ever have to go back and do an audit, if you have policies in place, you can check what the reasons and read out the justifications for each of the times that the privilege access was requested and granted. Now, sometimes I do have to log back out and log back in, so we'll go ahead and log out here and see if the access gets granted. And we'll close out of that browser, go back in, and we'll see if I have access to the admin portal now. It can take up to about 15 minutes. I notice sometimes logging out and logging back in does accelerate that process. And we'll sign in here. And as you can see, I now have access to get into the administrative portal because I've been granted elevated access at this point. Did we have any questions about the privilege identity management? Nothing that I see here. All right, excellent. So the next thing I'm going to be talking about is actually conditional access. Conditional access is one of my favorite features. It's the ability to specify rules on your users based off of criteria on many different scales. It could be if you log in from a certain IP address, if you log in from a certain device, it's possible to configure if someone logs in from a jailbroken phone, they are required to do a multi-factor authentication login or it's denied completely. Whatever you want to do with this is pretty flexible. They have a new thing called access templates, and I believe they're still in preview, and we'll take a look here to confirm that. But access templates have taken a lot of the main types of configurations people have done and put them into templates. If you've been working with Microsoft for a while, Microsoft 365 and the conditional access side, you might remember we used to have a loose template system when it was a different interface, and they took it away from us and been like, you pay for everything unless you're admin and you need to enforce multi-factor authentication. Well, they brought back the templates in a preview format inside the conditional access policy in Azure AD now. And that's what we'll go ahead and take a look at here. And we'll head back over to the administrator account that I have here. And if you go back to all services and security, you'll have conditional access here. I recommend if you're going to be in there a lot to star this because then it shows up in this nice bar on the left-hand side. So we'll start off with creating a new policy here, if it allows me. I think my trial ended on this account. So we will not show conditional access through here. The conditional access policies, we'll take a look through overview to see the step-by-step process. Conditional access policy, you'll first need to create a policy. The policy will then have you assign either a group of machines or a group of users and even individual users if you'd like to do that. I keep a list of at-risk admins, basically all the Microsoft 365 admin, global administrators in my organization, because we have a lot in this dev test tenant. I enforce them to do elevated privilege access of multi-factor authentication when they're not coming from one of our known IP addresses. So we have VPN that we are allowed to log into, which allows us to redirect where we're logging out from, and anyone's not in the organization domain at that time has to use a multi-factor authentication. Then you can go in and take a look at the policies and what recommendations. So if you do have administrative accounts, it will recommend multi-factor authentication as one of the #1 recommendations. And you can manage the policy settings for the different kinds of policies that you have. So classic policies are the old version of policies that we used to access through the admin center. And yes, I did let my license expire in Microsoft 365 by accident. It only allowed me to do a trial license, and then it extended the trial license without letting me purchase the license. I have a ticket in with Microsoft, but I think it expired 2 days ago. So hopefully I'll have that corrected here. A summary of this section is to limit your global administrative accounts. You really only need 2, maybe 3, with a maximum of 4, including your break glass account in your organization. There's lots of other administration access you can implement. Just-in-time access is a great workaround. Even if you're a 2-man IT group and you use just-in-time access to be in the same room. where, hey, Jim, I'm about to go do something administratively. I'm requesting access. Can you approve me real quick? It'd be a great way to just put a 4 eyes rule on it. That way, if you do send through a request or you didn't send through the request and someone's maliciously trying to request elevated access in your account, it's not mistakenly getting permitted. Multi-factor authentication is something I think we'll hear time and time again. It's not a truly passwordless society yet, which means multi-factor authentication at least gives us that extra level of authentication. I recommend using the Microsoft 365 app, because if you do have a smartphone and you require biometrics to log into your smartphone, then you're doing 3 factors of authentication, something you have, something you are, and something you know in order to access your Microsoft 365 accounts. A separation of your user account from your administrator account, of course. Conditional access, which I wish I could have shown you guys a little bit more today, and creating a password policy that doesn't make your employees want to claw their eyes out or start writing it down on sticky notes at their machine. It's a good way to go. Next thing here is around mobile devices. So mobile devices are a hard conversation. Do we allow them? Don't we allow them? Well, we've kind of gotten to the point where we can't not allow them. We had part shortages, we had machine shortages, chip shortages. We couldn't, as an organization, always provide the laptops and machines that were required for our employees to do their job for months and for last couple of years even. So having something as a hybrid is going to be your mobile app management policies. And mobile app management is the one that allows you to control what apps or when the app is able to be authenticated. So if it's on a certain type of device with conditional access, you can say nothing jailbroken. If you want to have a data loss policy, you can prevent the apps from being allowed to copy data outside of that application into another application. One of my favorite features is actually around secure email flow. Secure email flow will scan links and attachments inside of your email to make sure that there's no viruses before it sends the email to your end user. Enabling OneDrive protection is also something that's really nice. I use OneDrive protection on my virtual machines, and I use the same OneDrive account, so I have a single location where all of my individual desktops and documents and folders are saved to across my several machines, so that I can easily access each of those files no matter what machine I'm on, considering I have a desktop, I have a work machine here, and I have a road laptop I have to keep track of those files for. And alternative authentications. So app passcodes is something that you're able to do within the Microsoft 365 application. You can do a one-time passcode. This will work for any type of VPN that you have set up, for logging into computers if you have that set up. It should work offline because it's a generated code and token off of your authentication within your app. So that can be done in times where internet's not accessible. And then having token authentication if you're working inside of code using Azure AD authentication topology with a authentication token for applications instead of a username and password is way better. And basic authentication APIs are being deprecated. Officially, Microsoft said October again, but they pushed it out a couple of times while they've been developing the Microsoft Graph API. So we'll see if it actually gets deprecated in October, but a lot of the basic authentication interactions and APIs are being kicked out, and you'll need to switch over to modern authentication options, which are mostly available through your enterprise application suite. So you'll check any of your software that interacts with Microsoft 365. Make sure your vendors are using the newer modern authentication or have a plan to get you to that modern authentication. creating a single sign-on is one of the best things about using Microsoft for most things. Microsoft sign-on allows for authentication with almost every platform with the OAuth at this point. There's very few applications that I have found don't allow this single point of authentication. And the reason you want to do this is because you take away the ability for the end user to have their own password, have a password sprawl, or having a less secure password that doesn't meet your organization's policy and possibly doesn't have multi-factor authentication for getting connected in. So implementing SSO has become huge with all of these platforms we now have to use inside a business. And to summarize this section, looking into when it's more appropriate to have a mobile device management policy or mobile application management policy if you run a mostly BYOD configuration. Data loss prevention policies, if you run in the government orgs or any of the higher security clearance, you do need to have data loss prevention policies in place. Lots of ransomware, cybersecurity insurance is requiring showing that you do have things like BitLocker and that they're stored in a secure location, having a data loss prevention policy and some level of mobile device management for devices on your network. So definitely take a look if you are looking at ransomware or cybersecurity insurance, what is required. There are many cybersecurity insurances out there that are requiring 100% of the time multi-factor authentication. And if you have one account that doesn't have multi-factor authentication, you've automatically failed your security audit, even if that was not the way that your network was infiltrated. I've seen that happen a couple times, and this does include service accounts. So there are no exemptions to any type of account out there, which is, again, why you should be moving over to the modern authentication. This last section here is all about wrapping it up with audit and logging. So for those who haven't been in the center or weren't really sure why, Security and Compliance Center is now, again, Security Center and Compliance Center. They've split these off into two entities. There's still a lot of theoretical overlap the way that you look at it, but the compliance score is now, you have the compliance and the security score, depending on what type of interaction or alert that's happening. And we'll take a look at that here. If you're inside of the admin center, you're able to get to the extra admin centers, which you can see security and compliance. So whenever we look at security, we see up here, it's now Microsoft 365 Defender. It's probably because they wanted to be a little closer and in line with their licensing language. And then when we're looking at compliance, it's just Microsoft at this point. I'm not sure if they have come up with a name beyond the compliance portal. This one's still in preview for the official naming. And we'll start with what is now called the secure score, which was originally the compliance score. Inside of the secure score, the great thing about this is you don't have to do everything. But if you do want to know why you should do something, this is a great place to start. Like, for example, multi-factor authentication. This gives you the description of what could be wrong or what is wrong and why you should do it. Here is the impact that it could have on any of those affected users. Here is how you can put it into effect in your organization, what type of administrators at a minimum, which roles should be affected by this. and of course the links to the Microsoft documentation. If you do want to watch the change, watch it actually being applied, you can look that in here and change the status of the plan. So you can put this into action, say 4 months from now, we want to make sure everyone is switched over in order to meet compliance for a new cybersecurity insurance. You're able to track that here and assign someone to be a stakeholder for this that may not be you in your organization by sharing this out to them. The next thing here is about Microsoft Advanced Threat Analytics. Microsoft has gotten scary good at being able to break down and catch different type of behavioral attacks because they get so many people logging into virtual machines, into different apps, different components, and they're able to aggregate all of that back to their servers and start to list out they start to list out, okay, this happened 100 times, and it may have happened 100 times across thousands of organizations in 40 different countries, but they've tracked it and they know that A plus B equals C, which is a certain kind of attack, which is anomaly. Your trust has been broken, and you can have actions that happen off of those secured sign-in risk. And based off of these actions, it could be to shut down the account. This abnormal login could ping out, be added to a data sheet. You can export that where you need to export that to, and track when you might have the start of an attack in your organization. What's even cooler is Azure Sentinel. Azure Sentinel, if you ever get the chance to play with this, it is extremely fun. If you have any type of nerd inside about security and aggregation of multiple platforms, because this isn't just Microsoft products when you're looking at Azure Sentinel, you get extensions that go out to Azure, to AWS, to Google, to on-premises applications. It'll tap into Intune and it'll notice, okay, there's a certain kind of attack out there that attacks S3 buckets in Azure this specific way to compromise data flow from here, and then it somehow pivots over to the on-premises environment and accesses machine with a reverse login. This software is able to detect that through third-party application plugins, and you can create automated responses, playbooks, use pre-built custom dashboards. It's a lot of fun. The more logs you take in, the more it will take, like money-wise and time-wise, but it's a really cool piece of software if you ever get to play with it out there. So to wrap this up, if you've never been inside of your security or your compliance center, definitely go take a look at starting off. I would recommend with your security center. Security center is the most of the data at this point for locking down on the security side. Compliance is something you may need to have more conversations with your legal department. What are our recommendations? What do we need to have in order to be in compliance? Check out that secure restore, and then you can go through and also take a look at your workspaces, make sure these are still meeting the policies of your company. Beyond that, do we have any questions? I think my voice is about to go on me.
You've done well there, particularly after coming back from COVID. Massive thank you. Guys, anyone in the chat got any questions?
I saw a really lively chat, but I could not keep up with it. I do love that you guys have been great about posting links to all of these. I feel like I should have these as QR codes in my stuff now. There is one thing that I usually talk about when I'm doing the conditional access section is always put your thing on notification first. Do not put your policy in action. Have it like that for at least 2 weeks before you implement it, especially if it applies to everyone, because you will lock yourself out of your organization. If you don't, you got lucky.
The best thing I found with conditional access is the what if. The what if button is
all red.
yeah. If you do that and you get all red, you're like, okay, do not enable that.
Away slowly.
Or enable it on one account. And make
Yes.
sure it's a person you don't like.
At least you'd environment to be secure.
True.
Massive thank you. I'm presuming that nobody's got anything else. Any questions? Right. Massive thank you for that presentation. Brilliant. You know, I know myself personally. I use these within work, but it's also nice to have that bit of a refresher sometimes and a bit of a reminder. I'm sure many people are using these products on a daily basis as well. But massive thank you for giving us that whole overview. Really appreciate you taking your time to join us.
Thank you for having me. And they're always changing. Like, I go to Microsoft events and I'm always attending security sessions because something's always new every week.
Yeah.
Every day.
It's usually a name change.
Well, I super appreciate you guys having me. I had a ton of fun hanging out with you guys.
No,
And
thank you
everyone for being interactive in the chat.
No, thanks for coming on. It's been really good. Thank you.
Okay, Charlie. Have you got the presentation open still?
Yeah, just going back to it. Right. That should be
Okay, guys. So we've got Dwayne with us. As we mentioned earlier, Dwayne has posted in the chat a couple of times, so he's come to join us to give us an overview of a new community he's running. And also don't forget that there's a giveaway kindly of Dwayne and Pact. So I'll hand over to Dwayne.
Thanks, and that's this giveaway is for everybody, presenters and organizers as well. So everybody's welcome. So yeah, great presentations tonight. Really informative. It's good to hear other people talk about security rather than me talking to myself all the time. So, but yeah, real quick. Yeah, I've posted a couple times just for everybody. You know, I know about a good portion of you have already gone in and joined the Discord group that I manage for Pact, the SecPro community, and if you join the group and complete the form, we'll get a voucher out to you for an ebook. One of my ebooks, the SC300, which has been out for a few months, and the SC900, which actually started shipping today. It's available on Kindle right now, and it's shipping out on Amazon as we speak. So I'm going to do a drawing for 10 lucky people that'll get a voucher for that. But let me real quick, just I'm going to share my screen real quick and just kind of give everybody a quick overview of the community for those of you that haven't joined yet. And where's my... Oh, there's share. Okay, sorry, missing the share screen there. So just so everybody, everybody that hasn't joined yet, so you know what we're doing here. There is a Pact has started a security pro community. It's a community. They had a newsletter that they have around cybersecurity. You can see on the screen here. There's actually a link that you can join and get that emailed to you as well. But they created this Discord community, and they asked me because I had written a couple of security books for them to. If I wanted to manage this community for them, I said sure. And what we're doing is, and what I've started doing is, I've started building some things around certifications. I've tried to create events and call for speakers in here. Feel free, Charlie and Chris, to put your information in here about your events as well. I want everybody to kind of share and it not just be me posting in here. So put, security events. If you're looking for speakers, put your call for speakers in here for your user groups. Anybody else on here that organizes their own user group, feel free to do that. But just understand this is a security based group. So like I said, Charlie and Chris's group works perfectly for this because it is focused on security. If you do security talks and things like that that are part of your group, like like my user group, the Gimme Cloud talks, as well as Azure Back to School, which are a couple of things that I do for the community. You can do a security talk for that, so that's why I put those in here as well. So, but like I said, everybody's welcome to do that. There's a lot of people. There's a good amount of people. I think we're approaching 300 members on this server, and they talk about a whole bunch of different things. So, you can post things on different topics and ask different questions on here. Post different links of information you want to share with the community. There's resources down here. There's some book information for attack and defense books and things like that. It's still filling itself out. As I get a little bit, I've been running this, managing this for about a month now, and and once the summer, I think, hits, I'll get a little bit more time to put a little bit more focus in here. But around these certifications, I want to start putting some links to help people study. If you're studying for one of these specialties, this isn't Microsoft specific either. So so if somebody's doing Palo Alto or Cisco or any of those kind of certification, security based certifications, we can certainly add channels in here and things like that. So those are all all good things, and really just trying to grow the community, get everybody involved, and just have some fun talking about security.
Fantastic. Thanks, Dwayne.
Yeah,
really good to see
fantastic.
it growing, actually. Really good to see it growing.
Yeah, I know. I've been on there now for a few weeks since Dwayne shared it out, and fantastic community. I need to get a little bit more active in there myself. So that's a note to self that I need to get more active in there. But obviously, everyone's hopefully signed up tonight, and get yourselves involved. Obviously, you're here because you've got a keen interest in security and cyber security. So head on over there, and don't forget that Dwayne's kindly sorted out the giveaway for us, which everyone will get a prize of either his SC900 or his SC300 book.
Yeah, one of the things I really plan to do over the summer, because one of my goals this year is the ISC2 CCSP exam. So as I start to get together things, my own study topics and things like that, probably put some things in here and into the CCSP with links for everybody else that's doing that. Another thing I'm working on right now is the AWS security specialty. I'll probably start writing some blog study guides as I go through that, and I'll post those up on here for everybody. And like I said, anybody that's working to do that, I welcome. Anybody that's kind of doing anything. I see somebody actually put John Seville's SC100 on here. I was just seeing that. So you can see, perfect for just anybody that's looking for resources. We can get all those security resources in one place so that we all have somewhere to go.
Yeah. See, there's a comment there from Stuart. Do you have any curated lists of links to talks per subject to your platform? I suppose with it being a community, we can all help out with that.
Yeah, we can all certainly work on that. I can, I can certainly, what I can do is start up a channel in here for putting some of those talks together as well. Yep, that's a great idea.
Okay, well, we've got Dwayne on. Has anyone got any questions you'd like to ask? Feel free to come off mute. I think everyone's eager to for me to get on with the quiz.
How will we? We filled out the form. When will we find out if we get the free ebook or not?
I will let you know. Since I will do the drawing after everybody's give it probably till tomorrow. Give everybody after tonight and everything to get signed up and get that form complete, and then I'll do a random drawing out of the people that are in the form, and I'll let you know. And then you'll get contacted by somebody from Pact to get you your voucher.
Is that okay, Shaq?
Thank you.
Yeah, brilliant. Okay, thanks again for joining us there, Dwayne, and we'll definitely see you in the community. And note to ourselves there, Charlie, to get some MSCSUG stuff in there as well.
Yeah, no, definitely on the list.
Right. Okay, Charlie, do you just want to sort out the feedback?
Yeah, so obviously we've kept the same feedback form running for every single user group. So see if there is any feedback anybody'd like to give us. It helps us kind of improve the group really and know what people are looking for talks on. So yeah, please do give us feedback if there's anything, or reach out directly to me and Chris.
Yeah,
So,
feel free to reach out to us any time. More than happy to help.
Right, onto the quiz. So 2 prizes up grabs. The first is Amazon voucher and some HTG swag, and then the second prize is a Lego set or a digital Amazon voucher to the in local currency outside of the UK. Right, Chris, do you want to take over for the quiz?
Yeah. 1 second. Okay, can everyone see that? You see that okay?
Yep. Yep.
Yep, brilliant.
Yep.
Oh, okay, guys. We're going to be running a quiz on Menti. Okay. So if you all grab your phones, or if you want to use your laptop, or I think many of you know the drill by now. To take part, if you go to menti.com and enter the following code 81971988, or you can use the QR code, which is here. And see many of you filtering in. Put this full screen. Okay, we've got 10 there. What numbers have we got in the chat there, Charlie? You're on mute there, mate.
It's getting late in the day. So got about 20 people. So got half. So if anybody else wants to join in, now's your chance. So we're up to 11.
Okay, I'll give it another minute.
I think we're probably good to go. Oh, 12.
12. 10-second countdown. We should have a bit of music playing here, really, shouldn't we? To add some tension, like, Who Wants to Be a Millionaire?
No, you should just sing for a bit, Chris.
Yeah, go on, Chris.
Are you offering there, Alan?
It's not.
Not unless you want everybody else to leave real quick.
Oh, up to 14.
Okay, any more for any more?
5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Right, that's it.
Okay, everyone who's in, good luck. Okay, answer fast to get more points. Okay, so what is MISA? Microsoft Integrated Security Alliance, Microsoft Infrastructure Security Analysts, Microsoft Intelligent Security Association, Microsoft Intelligent Security Alliance. Pretty spread, and one person there, Microsoft Intelligent Security Association. Well done to that one person. Did you put that question in there on purpose, Charlie? This was so hard to answer.
I don't know. It's all over the press at the moment.
Okay, question 2. What day did we celebrate on the 5th of May 2022? World Encryption Day, World Password Day, World Hacker Day, or World MFA Day? Seems to be a day for everything this day and age. Are you going to come up with World Licensing Day, team? I think.
It wouldn't be that popular, would it?
Well done there, guys. So 7 of you getting it right. It was World Password Day. Question 3. What tool protects identities in the most comprehensive way? Single sign-on, conditional access, or multi-factor authentication? It's conditional access. Okay. I think that was a bit of a tough question there. But, I think most people did go for MFA. But well done to them for with the conditional access. Okay, question 4. What new vulnerability management tool was launched this month? Microsoft Defender for Vulnerabilities, Microsoft Defender for Vulnerability Management, Microsoft Vulnerability Management, or Microsoft Sentinel for Vulnerabilities. I think Charlie mentioned this earlier on, actually.
I did.
And it's Microsoft Defender for Vulnerability Management. Question 5. Which method cannot be used to deploy Defender for endpoints on Linux? Manually, Puppet, Chef, or Intune? And it's Intune. Question that one, Charlie. Okay, let's see where everyone's up to. And we've got Magical Rhino. Magical Rhino. Am I going to moan up? Okay, and then we've got Puffy in second, whoever Puffy is. And then we've got Dwayne in third. Banny, you're currently in fourth. I think you were our winner last month. Okay, question 6. What is available in Azure Firewall Premium that is not available in the standard SKU? Intrusion detection and prevention system, availability zones, inbound DNAT support, or force tunneling? Spot on. Some people know the Azure Firewall Premium SKU. Question 7. What is the name of the Microsoft exam SC100, which is currently in beta? Is it Security Operations Analyst, Identity and Access Administrator, Microsoft Cybersecurity Architect, or Information Protection Administrator? And Dwayne, if you get this wrong, I think we've got problems. Dwayne actually wrote some of the questions for this exam.
And I'm actually writing the book for Pact right now. So
So was this you, the single person over here?
No, that's not me at all.
Well done, guys. Moving on. What does RBAC stand for? Is it really basic admin control, role-based access control, role-based admin control, or role-based Azure control? I think everyone knew that one. I thought that was easy. I thought it was a bit tough on everyone last month, so I thought I'd go for an easy one. But at least everyone here knows the basics. Okay, let's check the leaderboard. Banny's made a bit of a recovery there. Let's see. We've got Tracy currently leading, Banny in second place, and Puffy in third. Okay, 2 questions to go. What is the missing word? A, endpoint is a network interface that uses a IP address from your virtual network. Is a firewall special, public, private? Letting people there getting it correct. Well done. Last question. What does NIST stand for? Is it the National Institute of Standards and Technology, the National Institute of Security and Technology, National Institute of Security and Threat, and National Institute of Standards and Threat? Well done. Some people out there, I don't know whether that was a guess or they knew it.
The USB-based people have an advantage on that one.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, guys. Drum roll. This is new, isn't it, Charlie? Press enter to end with a bang. Well, the drum roll's not playing for some reason. Leave that out maybe next time. Let's see. Could there be all change at the top? And it's Tracy. Well done, Tracy. It's got top prize there. If you can reach out to me, I'll drop the email in chat. If you can reach out to me on there via the email, and we'll get your prizes. I'll speak to our marketing team, the HTG's marketing team tomorrow. So if you, I'll just drop this in the chat. HTG.org. Just send me your details over, and I'll speak to Danielle from marketing and HTG, and we'll get it sent over straight to you. And Dwayne, yourself as well, if you can reach out to me. In fact, I'll catch you on LinkedIn and get your prize to you as well. So massive thank you, everyone, and I'll hand back to Charlie.
Cheers, Chris. So yeah, thanks everyone for joining tonight. Some really good sessions and yeah, really enjoyable. So thanks to our speakers for that, and thanks for everyone who commented in the chat and participated. It's been really, really interactive session, which has been great. So our next event we've got scheduled for the 30th of the 6th, so 30th of June, same time, 8 p.m. British summertime. This session is going to be obviously has been recorded, so will be uploaded in probably the next day or two onto our YouTube channel anyway. So if you want to go back and catch that, obviously you can follow us on Twitter at MSCSUG or on LinkedIn via the link there. All our links are available at go.mscsug.org/links. So yeah, thanks everyone. Really appreciate everyone joining tonight. Been really good.
Yeah, massive thank you. And I also just want to give a massive thank you to our sponsors, HTG, as well, for sponsoring the event and offering the prizes up for the quiz winners. And once again, also a massive thank you to Dwayne and Pact for the book giveaway tonight. You know, all these little things do really help pull the user group together, you know, and give something back to the community. And we're looking to build. So if everyone can get on and try and fill our feedback form in as well, we really do appreciate that. And then, you know, we are a new young community, but we want to grow. We want to keep growing and sharing the knowledge around the community. So any feedback that we get to make this better, then, you know, we're open ears.
No, brilliant. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, guys.